I try and remember to record for people who were unable to make the class. So not always do I remember, but for the sake of the recording, our first method was to create a wash, take a tissue, wad it up, and blot out the clouds by lifting the paint off the page. And you want to remember to turn your tissue and create, because you don't want it to look like a rubber stamp, the same image. It's a very amorphous image. So that's the first way of creating clouds in a sky. We're going to move on now. You want to make sure you have clean water and a clean brush for this next one. You don't want to have blue paint residue. So I'm going to make sure my brushes are clean. Where's my rag? What I like to do when I'm painting is I have 2 water cups. I have one to rinse off my brush, and I have one to dip my clean brush into when I go to add more water to the paint. And I have a little dump bucket so I can refresh my water. Okay, moving right along. This next way of creating a sky is wet your brush, but you're not going to put your brush into the pigment. You're going to wet your square or your paper, whatever you're working on, and just wet the area of your square that is going to be your sky. So I just wet my square with plain water. You probably can't see it because it's transparent. But you want to look at it and make sure that there's so much patience in watercolor. Drying time is important. So I want this. I don't want it to be puddly like it's in the middle of a rainstorm. I want it to look like it's glistening, like the pavement would glisten after a rainstorm. So while it's glistening, and it's right about at that point, I am now in random places with a damp brush and dipping it into my color. I'm now going to just add color to the wet paper. Oh, I don't want to try to keep it flat. I don't want it to run. But I'm just adding color in random places, not doing a wash like I was before. Just adding color in the area that I want to leave sky, and the area that I want to have the cloud is going to be my paper. And you'll see if your paper is wet, it's going to create a soft edge. It's going to feather out. And I don't do it symmetrically. I kind of like the asymmetric. So sometimes my clouds are on a diagonal. I usually don't have one cloud in the middle of my paper. And I might have a couple little sky holes in there, like where I drop in just a little bit of paint. And so some of these areas now, you'll see it's starting to feather where it's wet. It's kind of like, you know how sometimes you get that starburst that you sometimes get with tie-dye, where it kind of expands out. And if you find you're getting a hard edge that you don't want, dampen your brush and just hit up the area around and the white space around the blue spot that you're trying to soften. So if you find you have a hard edge, once again, damp brush, go to the white space around the hard edge of the blue and just touch that blue edge to soften it. So you'll see that this creates a totally different kind of sky effect, like you'll see in this painting, where the it's really fuzzy edges, where the cloud, and this, the white is just the paper, and I applied water to the paper. Do I have one that's dark? Yeah, here you see it a little darker. Water to the paper, and then just dropped in blue color around, but not, it's not like the first one where we did a wash and then removed the paint. Here we do kind of like the opposite. We wet the square and then we just put drops of paint in while it's wet to get that very feathery, soft and amorphous edge. Now, some of my demo clouds here have some hard edges that I'm not loving. So I'm just going to come back in with my damp brush and soften them up around that hard edge and smush it up. You don't want your brush to be too wet because you might get a run back or a bloom, which I will show you in a little while. Sometimes when you do skies, because often skies are darker or bluer at the top of the painting, and as the sky hits the horizon line, it gets a little fainter. So if you're painting on an angle, sometimes I paint flat, sometimes I paint on an angle, depending on if I want the paint to move and flow. So if I'm doing a sky and I want my paint to concentrate at the top, I'll flip my painting upside down. So when the paint dries and moves, it'll be going to what is the top of the painting when I flip it back to its orientation. Well, these are really kind of crazy, wonky clouds. These are like sci-fi clouds. But again, it's here to teach you the technique. I'm not out to make a masterpiece, but what I can do is some of these shapes that I'm not crazy about, take my damp brush and kind of smush them around. And that will further create the graduating effect in the sky, because very rarely are our blue skies just one solid shade of blue. There are some clouds that are closer to us and some clouds that are further away. So there's all kinds of variants. Put them up a little up here. Okay, now what you can do while this is still wet, and I think it's, well, I don't know, I'll devote that concept to another square. This square is just to show you how to wet the paper first, then add your blue. And then you can pick it up and then move it around. But normally in watercolor, you want your white areas to be the paper. So you'll just move it around. And we're just using one color at this point, because what I want to do in our next square, I'm just going to stick with one color for now, because we will graduate into adding more color. How are we doing for time? Oh, we're good. All right. So how are we doing with that? Everybody got the hang of that one? You have a question? All right. If you have not already unmuted yourself, you can, I see Enid, I'm going to ask you to unmute, because if you have a question, speak right up. Sometimes I'm busy with my paper and I'm not looking at everybody's little Hollywood square box on the screen. So just speak right up if you have a question. Okay, let's move on. Now, this time, what I would like you to do is remember I asked you to get a quarter? Get your quarter. Where is my quarter? No, I put it down. Here it is. This is a technique that's fun. I call it the coin trick. You're going to take your quarter and you're going to put it in the tissue and lay the tissue flat around the quarter, and kind of twist it from behind so you have something that looks like this. This is the way my grandmother used to send me to school, with a nickel in my pocket for candy after school. She would take a hanky and put the nickel in there and twist it up so I would keep it in my pocket. So this is just going to be at the ready for what we do next, because this is fun. I like this. What we're going to do now, you can use your round brush or your flat brush. I'm working big with your squares might not be as big as mine. You could do, little 3x5 card, because I want you to see this. I'm going to work down here. You want your paint, your blue paint, to be strong enough and dark enough so you'll see a contrast. So what I'm going to do is load up my brush with pigment, and this time I'm going to move from cobalt blue. I have an indigo blue, which is a little darker, because I want you to be able to see this technique. So I'm going to lay my pigment down. Oh, I want it to be darker. Come on. I'm going to lay my pigment down in a wash like I did in the first square. Come on, get darker, girl. There we go. And I don't want to tilt this up too much because it's going to run. So I'm just going to cover my square right now with paint. Nice thick layer. Oh yeah, nice and thick. Okay, so this is dark, like an indigo nighttime sky. So I can't really tilt this up because it'll run, but you can see it here. So now what I'm going to do, I've got my quarter, it's nice and wet. I've got my quarter wrapped up in my tissue. You want your painting to be flat on your board. Take a break and watch me now, because this is the secret. You wad up your quarter and your tissue, lay your painting down flat, and now where you want your moon to be, you're going to press, and don't move. Don't move it. Press your tissue with your quarter down flat on your painting, count to 5, and then lift it off. And you'll see we've got our moon there. I love this. I call it the coin trick. Now, I did this yesterday and then I walked away, and I shouldn't have, because I came back and I had all these blooms. Remember I told you about a bloom? A bloom is when there's a run back, where there's a lot of water and it runs back into the painting, and it creates these kind of cauliflower bloomish kind of things. Sometimes you can get that to work for to your advantage in painting. Other times, watercolorists don't like that. You can only fix it if it's still damp. Once it's dried, it's really hard to scrub that out. So you want to, and drying time is important in painting. Now I have some paint that's pooling on the bottom of that square. So I'm just going to take my tissue and blot up some of this extra paint, and maybe it will create some kind of cloud-like images where I'm trying to soak up the paint and create more mood in my sky. And I think there's like too much texture with the blotting this out. So I would take a damp brush and maybe smooth a little bit of it out. Just smooth it out a little bit. So now you've got like your moon and some eerie clouds in the sky. And this is one technique that works better flat. You don't want to tilt your paper and have your paints run. Okay. Do a little blotting. There's no right or wrong to this because clouds are always changing. The sky is always changing. Okay, so now you learned the coin trick. Brush off. Okay, any questions before we move on? Okay. Okay. Oh, Pat, I see you're here. All right, let me mark you. Okay, is Rachel here? Okay, I'm recording this, so you'll be able to play it back if you want a refresher. But I always send a follow-up email to my students after class describing what we did in class with often some supplemental information. Oh, I did get from another painter this morning. I got a really cool guide to brushes that I will include in your after class email that describes what different brushes are used for, what different bristles are used. Okay, we're gonna move on. So we did the wash with dropping out with tissues. We did a colorless wash where we dropped in pigment in various areas, and then we did the coin trick. So let me move this and start another. Here's my other pad. Here we go. All right, so before we get started with this one, you might want to wake up your other paint colors. All you needed for this class were blue, yellow, and red, our primary colors. Very often in the morning and late afternoon, sunrise and sunset, you'll see different colors in the sky. It just won't be blue or gray. You might see storm clouds that have some gray. Oh, there's reflection in here. That have gray in them. where's that one paint here? Here's one where there might be color on the horizon, like this has a purple color on the horizon. And where is that sunset on the cliffs? Come on, come on, here we go. This is more like a sunset where the only blue is at the top of the sky, where you've got your other gradient colors coming down. So, and also here's your storm clouds on the horizon, where the blue is just a minimal part of the sky, where there's gray in the clouds, there are purple in clouds, there are yellow in clouds. This has a little bit of yellow in those clouds. And in this one, there's some yellow in the clouds. But what we want to be careful with in painting a gradient sky is that I'm going to start with some blue at the top of my sky. Just going to make my blue sky right around the top. And it doesn't have to be one straight line. It can be a little wavy. But if I wanted to add yellow, then the two colors are going to commingle and make green. And we don't normally see green skies unless it's something like the aurora borealis. So what I like to do is either separate and put my yellow. See, in this painting, the yellow is separated by white space that I created a cloud. So I've got blue, I've got white space, and then I dropped in some yellow because I didn't want my yellow and my blue to commingle and make green. So often what I like to do if I'm doing a sunset is on the bottom, or if I want that very colorful, dramatic sky, on the below my blue that is still wet, I'm going to come in with my red, or in this case, pink. And I'm going to work, I left a little white space between the blue and the pink, because now I'm going to get them, I'm going to move them together and marry them. So when they get together, they create purple. And purple is a color that we see in our skies. So that doesn't bother me. But the yellow or green sky, I think that would bother me. Well, only if I'm trying to do like a realistic sky or something believable. If I was doing some sci-fi sky, well, that could be a green sky. But if I want to then bring in my yellow, I would do it under my red, because red and yellow make orange, and orange is a color that we see in sunset. So now I'm bringing my yellow in under my red or my pink. My red isn't super intense. And just kind of smudging and blurring that line between them. So it's not a real harsh line. And as the paints mix and mingle, you'll get that nice blurred, soft line. Now I see I have a bloom starting to happen here at the top with my blue. So the way that you can only fix a bloom when it's still wet. I'm just going to take a damp brush and smush it out. Try and smush out those dark, that sharp edge, and soften it. And while I'm dropping out the paint, it's almost creating like some clouds effect, because it's removing the paint and creating some clouds in my background. I just move it, just a little twirly movement with the brush. That's why we're practicing with these little squares today. This is practice. I don't want you to feel pressure that you have to make a masterpiece. I like to have people throw away that masterpiece mentality, because then you're focusing on the end product and you're not staying in the moment. If you stay in the moment and are playing with the paint and getting lost in the and the magic of what is happening, you will make a far better painting if you stay in the moment. If you're constantly thinking and stressing about the end product and I don't like the way it looks and you're judging, and then your painting's going to come out looking stilted and contrived and like it's getting choked to death. So abandon any kind of masterpiece mentality. Think about this as creative play. Play with the material. That's how you'll get to know it better. So if you have blues and reds and yellows and they make a nice striation across, then you get a sense of a sunset.
Mm-hmm.
And you can also now, you could take, if you don't like, there's a lot of distinction like between the pink and the yellow. So you could take a little bit of yellow and a little bit of your pink and or red and make an orange. Now, yellow is considered the weakest of the three primary colors. So you might need more yellow than red to make an orange. It wouldn't be equal parts red and equal parts yellow. You're going to get something that's more red. It's going to be an orangey red, because red is stronger than yellow. So I'm getting like some.
You're using a round brush?
I am using a round brush here.
Okay, thanks.
But now that I added orange, I'm starting to get some blooms. So I'm just going to work those edges, wipe my brush off, remove the paint if I need to. And normally when we look at skies, like sunset kind of skies, it's a linear kind of horizontal line. We don't normally see vertical lines in our skies. We usually see horizontal-ish kind of lines in our skies. So you might want to work your brush from left to right instead of up and down. And often with watercolor, less is more. If we overwork it, we can tickle it to death and then it loses spontaneity. But it's, you can blend with a damp brush if you don't like some hard lines. It's good to have striation and different hues. And you can play with dropping in different colors. I only talked about the three colors, our primary colors, because you could mix just about any color you want with only three colors. If you have a Payne's gray, that would be great for our next technique. Payne's gray is a bluish gray. And if you don't have it, that's quite all right, because a really great way to make gray or a neutral is to blend together all three primary colors. So I made an orange by creating yellow and red together. Blue and orange are opposite each other on the color wheel. They are complementary colors. So I'm going to add some blue to my orange, and I should be getting a gray. Oh yeah, I got a nice gray there. Now, a lot of people say, oh, you know, I add two complementary colors together. I added orange and blue, or I mixed together red and green, or I mixed together purple and yellow, and I got mud. Well, one person's mud is another person's neutral. And I do like, neutral colors are very important in painting. That's what creates our shadows. So I have a nice gray here that I have blended in this well. I mixed red, yellow, and blue all together. So now this next sky that I want to show you is a stormy sky. And again, this is playing with the paint, learning how to create different effects. So this time I'm going to use my flat brush. And at the top of my square, I am just going to load up my brush. I think I'm going to use the indigo. And because this is a very windy kind of sky right before a storm, I'm not going to go back and forth with my brush strokes. My brush strokes are going to emulate the wind force. So my brush strokes are going to be more like a diagonal, like this, where I'm making some diagonal brush strokes, and I'm turning my paper upside down because I want my pigment to be darker at the top. So I'm letting it flow. Now that I did a little blue at the top, I'm going to come in with my neutral on the bottom, because we're going to get those gray storm clouds. And my sky is modeled right now outside my window. I'm going to come up in the bottom with the gray and create those stormy clouds underneath it and pounce in that gray. Wipe my brush, and then I'm going to smooth over the bottom because I don't want those choppy diagonal marks. I'm just smoothing out the bottom of those strokes. So now I've got my gray storm clouds that are on the bottom. And you could, I don't know, have I done it before with the gray clouds or the, yeah, if you have gray clouds at the top, you could do that too. And I like, and then have blue at the bottom. We could play with that. So now I'm letting the colors mix and mingle. So I get nice soft edges.
How did you get those soft edges? I'm getting like strokes more.
Okay, so wet your brush and wipe it off on your towel. And with a damp brush, start at where the white space is. Let me see, bring this in close. The white space, and soften the edge by just kind of tickling it with the damp brush, coming from the white space.
Without color, right? Just the water?
Without color, just with water. So you're softening the edge. You don't want it to be too wet because then you'll get a bloom.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. So I just came in from the white area into the color and soften it by, you know, just giving it a little rub as if I were erasing a line. And now you'll see how it's mixing and mingling, and you get those stormy gray clouds. Okay. So now, oh, we're doing very well for time. Good. If I'm going too fast and somebody says, wait, you know, just let me know. Like I said, this is, I am recording this and I am going to do a recap email. So don't stress. But see what's happening here. And this is one of the magics of watercolor that I like. As it's drying, I'm getting some interesting amorphous cloud looking like lines with shadows And I did not do that myself. That is the magic of watercolor. I just laid down the paint and it's doing what it wants to do. And it's cool. Anyway, now this is where you want to get your salt out, as this is fun. This creates atmosphere. I have coarse kosher salt and, oh no, that's my Aquaphor. I have coarse kosher salt and a regular salt shaker. So what I'm going to do now, this creates great atmosphere. I'm going to load up my brush with paint, and I'm going to use a flat brush, and I'm going to use my darker indigo blue. Today I was just using cobalt and indigo for my darker. Because now,
Apologies. I couldn't hear what you said.
no, I must have hit my watch. She's talking to me. I'm just going to do a wash in my next box of a blue paint and try and smooth it out so I don't have these, I don't want to see any horizontal lines of my wash. I'm just going to lay down the pigment and then move my paper around, tilt it, let it mix and mingle. And now this is really fun. Oh, and some watercolors, like especially ultramarine blue, they can be grainy. It's the nature of the pigment and the minerals used. So sometimes they look more grainy than other colors. So now I've got my whole area covered with blue, and I should keep it flat for this. You're going to take some salt. Now your bigger crystal, and you're just going to sprinkle. These are huge. This looks like rock salt. And you're just going to sprinkle some salt onto the wet watercolor. If it's dry, it will not work. And in contrast, I'm also going to shake some salt on there. And what the salt does is it eats the pigment. And when it's dry, you've got to wait until it's absolutely dry. So you might not be able to do it here in class. You might have to walk away and come and do it in an hour. You will brush the salt off and you'll see all these speckles. And sometimes the salt, especially the larger pieces, they leach out and they make these starburst effects. So this kind of texture making with salt, and once it's dry, you rub the salt off into the garbage can or whatever. It doesn't stay stuck to your painting. However, it does create a great texture, which is great for beach sand, or if you want to create pebble kind of effect, or a starry night, or a hailstorm. It creates great texture because the salt eats into the pigment and like kind of gives it like an acid burn or something. But once that salt is dry and you wipe it away, you'll see the salt has leached and bleached into the pigment, and it creates a great textural element. So these 6 techniques that we learned today, I urge you to practice and play with. You'll find that they work with so many, not just skies, but the salt creates a great like beach sand or a dirt road kind of effect. We'll review that next week when we do the terrain. But I encourage you to play with these techniques during the week. Now you've got more tools in your tool belt. You have some new skills that you learned today, and I will review all of them in my follow-up after class email. Are there any questions?
Thank you. That was really fun. It was
I'm
great.
glad.
Very
See, that's
interesting.
why I'm saying sometimes painting landscapes are much more fun than looking at them. Because if I were to hold up to you now, these exercises, it'd be like, ho hum, they look like blotches of color and squares of exercises. But when I revisit in my head how much fun it was to do it at the time, that's what I want you to cling to, is the fun of the creative process. Don't worry about the end product. That is totally irrelevant. I want you to stay in the moment and enjoy the painting process.
It was very
So
enjoyable.
thank you for your time, ladies.
Yeah,
And
this was great.
you'll be hearing from me, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Katie, and
Thank you so much. Have a good
happy
week.
Teacher appreciation.
Oh, thanks. I couldn't do it without my students.
Well, we appreciate you.
Thank you. Have a good
Bye.
week.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.